world today is driven by fear. Fear is a powerful emotion. It's the chink in your armor that the enemy uses to control you. The Apostle John wrote that the whole world lies in the sway of the wicked one, who, with the World Wide Web at his disposal, now has a distribution network like never in history. So many different voices with twisted truth, designed to keep you off balance and driving you to learn more and more. Is it bringing you peace? Are you weary? Are you finding it harder to be still and to hear the still small voice of the one who loves you? So grab your favorite beverage, find a quiet place, and join Banner Kid for the Love is Calling podcast. Let's focus on Jesus, the lover of our souls.
Well, hello and welcome to the Daily Good News. This is Banner. Thank you, JB, for that introduction. And we're going to be jumping back into the book of Mark today. Going to be in Mark chapter 8. Had a great podcast release this morning. That was just, I really felt like God had something he wanted to impart to us, and I believe he still does. I think he has me on a mission. He's given me a vision. And what I'm beginning to understand is I'm not the only one that has that. As I speak to other pastors and believers here in Northeast Indiana, I'm finding out that God's telling them similar things. It's a testament to the vision itself, and that he is seeking to unite us in the Spirit into one mind, the very mind of Christ. And there are a lot of voices that are competing for that headspace. They're competing to be heard and to drown out the still small voice of the Lord Jesus Christ, the voice of the Spirit. He's a gentleman. He's not going to kick the door down. But I'll tell you, many of these people in religion kick the door down. They are all about destroying you, creating fear, doing things and saying things in such a way to gaslight you, to get you to question what you know is true. And it's important that we remember that. And that's not a new problem. That's been a problem all the time, ever since mankind was created. The devil knows where we're at. He knows what's in our heart, just like Jesus does, as I was saying in the previous podcast. The devil knows how to dangle just the right thing to cause us to go after it, to cause us to begin to feel good about knowledge and elitism and things like that, and begin to look down at other people and begin to put the stake in the hill of our religion, rather than the only stake that's worth anything is the stake, the cross of Jesus Christ and him crucified. That's the hill I'm going to die on. I've said before, I'll say it again. Now listen to what he says in Mark chapter 8, picking up in verse 13. It says that he left them, and getting into the boat again, he departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than one loaf with them in the boat. Then he charged them, saying, "Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." And they reasoned among themselves, saying, "It is because we have no bread." But Jesus, being aware of it, said, "Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many baskets full of fragments did you take up?" They said 12. He says in verse 20, "Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up?" And they said 7. So he said to them, "How is it that you do not understand?" This is important that we get it. And Mark has a way of just getting right down to the nitty-gritty of something. If you read in Matthew and Luke and John, you'll see these stories expanded on. But when he's talking about the leaven of the Pharisees, he has nothing in mind about the bread you eat. And that's interesting because in the Hebrew roots movement, those in Messianic Judaism that I was once a part of, this was all about, every time you see leaven, it was all about the leaven that causes bread to rise when you bake it. And a lot of misunderstanding in there. about that. But Jesus makes it clear he's not talking about the leaven in the bread. He has a different thing in mind. You see, the things that we read in the Old Testament, for example, like the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the idea of finding the leaven in the home and throwing it out and not eating any leaven during that 7-day period, it's a type, a shadow of the very substance. And the substance and the reality, the true of that is Jesus Christ coming to take away the sins of the world. But that doesn't stop man at the devil's inspiration to continue to sow leaven into us. Listen, Jesus said, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Now, he had just gotten off of verse 11 where the Pharisees came and began to dispute with him, asking about a sign from heaven. They were testing him. This is what he's talking about. See, the devil is going to do that. Man will always come and do that. Well, what about this? Well, what about the seventh-day Sabbath? And what about eating pork? And what about how long your hair is? And do women wear pants or do they just wear dresses? And on and on and on and on. The devil's doing that. It's not about holiness. It's about holier than thou. And it's about the devil throwing all of these different things at us to the point where we don't hear Jesus anymore. And these people are not for real. In another place, Jesus tells them very clearly that when he's talking about the leaven of the Pharisees, he's talking about their hypocrisy. We talked about that before. The word hypocrite means to be an actor or a pretender. You're not for real. It's just like the guy who plays the cop in the big movie. He's not a cop. He is not a cop. He is an actor pretending to be a cop. When the camera's on, he acts like he is. When the camera's off, he's probably texting on his phone to somebody. Listen, we need to wake up. This world is full of the gaslighters because the enemy, the liar in chief, is running rampant. And he's taking advantage of the uncrucified things in our lives, every single one of us. Some are willing participants, and some of us just don't know any better. But we can know better. We can know better. God has something for us, brothers and sisters. It's called truth, and he's the Spirit of truth who leads us into all truth. So when he says, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod, he's not talking about the bread. He's not talking about the leaven that caused that bread to rise. As a matter of fact, they didn't even have yeast at that time. At that time, they caught the leaven, the bacteria in the air. Have you ever had a friendship bread starter? Most of us guys probably don't know what that is. Some of you women will. But that's where there is dough, and it's put into a jar, usually with a cheesecloth on it so that it can breathe. And the bacteria in your house, in your air, will begin to infiltrate into that dough and cause that dough to rise. And you continue to add to that. You bake some, add more to it. You continue to let it go. That's what they were doing back then. They would have a starter, like a sourdough starter, but that's how they made bread. Had nothing to do with yeast. They didn't have yeast. I'm not sure the exact date, but I believe it was in the early 60s before yeast was actually invented. So when they tell you got to get the bread that you buy from Kroger out of your house because it's got yeast in it, and you're looking at all the jars and you're reading all the different terminology and the ingredients and go, I can't have that, throw it in the garbage. Listen, throw what they're telling you in the garbage. That's all gaslighting. That's not of God. This is simple, brothers and sisters. God's talking about something that matters. It's not what goes into you that defiles you, Jesus said. It's what comes out of you, out of the abundance of your heart. That's what defiles you. If you're a born-again believer in Christ and it's the Spirit of God to whom you're yielding and causing you to speak and do as his vessel, you're not being defiled in that, but you are defiled when you come at people and you begin to shout and spout legalism at them with hatefulness and divisiveness. We're told clearly by Paul and Titus to reject such a person. We need to remember that. This is about love. Brothers and sisters, can't we just love one another? I'm not talking about that sappy love, and I'm not talking about that kind of love that you watch on the movies, where somebody's ready to hop in a sack with somebody and the next scene they're hopping in with somebody else, and we call that love. That's not love. That's called perversion. That's called lust. It's not love. Love, the kind of love God's talking about, is the kind of love that lays your life down, lays my life down for you, you for me for my brothers and sisters, and you likewise. It's the kind of love that Jesus has for us, that as we yield to the Spirit of God, that kind of love will be born in us as a fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22. I keep going back to it because it's so important. The fruit of the Spirit is love. It's love. Let us allow the Spirit to bear the fruit of love in our lives. Let people see us and know that we're the children of God because we love one another and we love Him. Let's show the difference, if there is indeed a difference. If you're born again, there will be a difference. But if you're not born again, well, you're going to look just like the world. You just might make it look, kind of like some form of religion. You might be guilty of allowing the enemy to work in your heart that you masquerade as an angel of light. But the reality is, it's leaven and it's hypocrisy. We don't want to be hypocrites. Let's love in not just word, but word and deed. And let's let that love be not conjured up by our own flesh, but by the power of the Spirit who is God. That's what He wants. I hope that's what you want. Till we talk again on the Daily Good News, have a wonderful evening.
If you've been encouraged by this podcast, please subscribe to Love is Calling and tell your friends to check it out. If you have any questions, email Banner at bannerkid.com. That's BANNER at BANNERKIDD.com. And join us for future episodes of Love is Calling as we continue to focus on Jesus, the lover of our souls.